Okay, so after the Spanish crush the Texas portion of the Mexican Revolution, um, the province of Texas is just in complete shambles. Uh, just a number of Texans, Tejanos, had been killed with the Battle of the Medina. Some had been killed with the massacres in San Antonio, also the massacre in Nacogdoches. A number of families that had supported the Mexican Revolution against the Spanish in Texas fled to New Orleans, such as the Seguin family. So, yeah, Texas is in complete shambles after the defeat of the Texas portion of the Mexican Revolution. So much so that by 1821, when Spain gives over to Mexico, that's a key moment I'm going to test you on. That's a date that you need to know. 1821 is when Mexico does become an independent nation, and uh, Texas goes from being under Spanish sovereignty to being under Texas sovereignty, a status it would enjoy until 1836. I'm not sure enjoy is the right word, but possess until 1836. Uh, so by 1820, there may have been only 2,500 um, Tejanos, people of Spanish descent in Texas. There were maybe 25 or 30,000 Comanche, we're not for sure. There were other native groups in Texas, but there was just a smattering of Spanish. And I'll give you kind of an amazing, I may repeat this later in a podcast, but that's okay. I believe in repetition. In 1820, let's say there's 2,500 people of European descent in Texas. Um, in Arkansas and Louisiana, in Arkansas and Louisiana, there were 167,000 Americans. So let me say that again. In the U.S. states that neighbored Texas, first Spanish and then in 1821 Mexican Texas, 167,000 in Arkansas and Louisiana. By the way, I'm not going to test you on 167,000. I know that's the kind of thing that drives people crazy. I just want you to get a sense of what Mexican Texas is facing, because right next door, you've got there's just this population disparity between Louisiana and Arkansas, the two states that border Mexican Texas. Again, 167,000 to 2,500. And if you go just a little bit further east, there's 220,000 Americans, white, and their captives, their enslaved captives, in Mississippi and Alabama. So here's the big point that I'm making. It's no surprise that Texas will fall to the United States by 1845. Uh, uh, Mexican Texas, when it comes into existence in 1821, it's outnumbered by multiple times to by its neighbor to the east and to the north, the United States of America. And the other thing is, Americans, folks in the United States, beginning with Thomas Jefferson, they are covetous of Texas. They want Texas, and why do they want Texas? Because they know the soil, especially of East Texas, which is not it really hasn't been touched in terms of cultivation of crops. I mean, you'd had ranching in this area, but you hadn't had major crop cultivation. Americans knew that East Texas was an incredibly rich area for the growth of cotton, which is the most dominant and the most profitable crop in the world at this time. I'll say this a number of times, but cotton basically is the oil of the 19th century. It's the commodity that made the world go round. It's the commodity that was in greatest demand because you're having population growth, worldwide population growth. At the same time, you have the development of huge textile mills that are developing the cloth that are putting clothes on this growing population in Europe and the US and elsewhere in the world. But the many other things that you can do with cloth. And most of that cloth is mass produced by cotton. So cotton is quite profitable. And as Americans look to Texas, they think, boy, if we could just get in there and we could, start cultivating cotton, we could make fortunes, which is ultimately what happens. Now, the other side to that story, the tragic side to that story, is the fact that the white Americans that will come into Texas beginning in the 1820s are going to bring their enslaved captives with them, African Americans. So it's beginning in the 1820s that you have the introduction of people of African descent into Texas. So what happens is, as I said before, by 1819, just the very last years of Spanish rule, Texas is a wreck. There's a major flood in San Antonio in 1819. It's just a mess. And into this scenario comes Moses Austin. He's the father of Stephen F. Austin, who the capital was named after. Moses Austin was from Missouri. He spoke Spanish. He had dealt with the Spanish when the Spanish, for a brief time, controlled the Louisiana territory. He had made his fortune in lead mining. But there was a terrible panic in the United States, a depression in the United States in 1819, and Moses Austin lost all his money. So he looked at Texas and he came up with a scheme. So what he does is he comes into Texas and he talks to Spanish authorities, and it's very Spanish authorities aren't really willing yet, or they're very reluctant to talk to an American. But here's Moses's proposal. He said, "Look, I'm going to bring in a couple of hundred families from the United States, maybe as many as 1,000 ultimately. I'll bring in good families, people that you can trust. And these families will settle in Texas. They will bolster the economy of Texas because they will start growing cotton. They will also help you in your fight against the Comanche, because right now you're outnumbered in your fight against the Comanche. And so basically, what Moses Austin is saying to the Spanish is, hey, let me populate Spanish Texas with Americans. And the not so secret agenda of Moses Austin was, yes, these white Americans that would be coming in with their slaves, because slaves were the ones that were tasked with the actual labor of planting and picking cotton. And I'm going to talk a lot more about slavery in the following weeks. And of course, it's a horrible situation. It's a nightmare for the slaves that come in. And I'm going to talk about that at great length. So this is Austin's proposal. Moses is Austin's proposal. And it doesn't go well. The Spanish kind of blow him off. He meets a friend of his, a guy by the name of Baron de Bastrop. And anyway, through these connections, the Spanish agree. They say to Austin, okay, we'll let you do this. We'll let you bring in some American families into Spanish Texas. There's some conditions. These families have to promise to be good Spanish citizens. They have to learn the Spanish language, and they have to become Roman Catholic. They have to convert to Roman Catholicism. So Moses Austin succeeds. He goes back up to Missouri, but on the way up to Missouri, he gets sick and then he dies. But as he's dying, he writes a letter to his son, Stephen F. Austin, and begging his son to carry on his legacy, to continue to fulfill the agreement that Moses Austin had made with the Spanish. It's about this time that we have the shift from the Spanish authority to Mexican authority, Spanish sovereignty to Mexican sovereignty. So let's just say goodbye to the Spanish for now, and let's talk about Mexico. Texas is now part of Mexico. Well, Stephen F. Austin comes in. He's a very clever, industrious, hardworking person. He does learn Spanish, which is very, very significant. He creates close ties with the Seguin family in San Antonio. And what he manages to do is he manages to get the Mexican government to agree to honor the contract that the Mexican government had signed with his father. So Stephen F. Austin fulfills his father's contract. He brings in an initial number. He's ultimately going to bring over 3,000 families into Texas, but he brings in 300 families into Texas. This is the what's called the Old 300. I guess they're kind of the Mayflower of Texas. And what you have is beginning in the early 1820s with Stephen F. Austin, you start having Americans allowed into Mexican Texas, American families coming into Mexican Texas to plant cotton, to bolster the economy of Texas, to help populate Texas to fight against the Comanche. And this is a major, major, major turning point in the history of Texas because now the door is slightly open to Anglo-American settlement.